Welcome back to the Full Spectrum Show. Today, we are going to be looking into this idea that I've been having for a little bit now, and that is AI being pushed even further into research and dependency with advancing technology and weaponry, such as hypersonic missiles. So I have a couple articles here, and this first one it specifically says algorithms when mentioning it, but it is all about talking about this new system called the HBTSS, or the Hyper and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor. So essentially what that is a sensor that they could use in space to track hypersonic missiles, because without knowing where they are, how fast they're going, you can't shoot them down or create defenses really against them because they're really, really fast. So in order to do this, they're going to need technology like this to actually identify these threats. And they're really hard to actually identify because they're moving so fast and they're moving over the surface of the Earth, which could include many things, including cities and just the actual ambient light off of, when we're tracking something in the sky using a blue-black drop or, a actual night space backdrop to be searching things. So it's a lot easier to detect things moving, looking up than looking down. And how they're doing this is using algorithms to actually try to figure out what's the ambient and then what is the fast-moving targets or the fast movers. So how do they do that? They don't really get too deep into it, and I'm guessing it's because most of it's classified. But I would imagine that they're using some type of artificial intelligence or the algorithm to basically break this down and try to discern what is what from the signal to clutter, or is it just the actual fast mover, or it's going to be really difficult to do. And it looks like we are investing quite a bit of money into it in the US, about $256 million for this specific program, which makes sense because we're coming into the age of hypersonic technology. Going further into this, it looks like China, at least it says, has developed a heat-seeking hypersonic missile. Now this is really interesting because I've always figured this would be one of the largest, the largest deficiencies with all the stealth technology that's coming out, and that is thermals. It's really hard to get rid of a thermal from a jet engine, for example. But, there's plenty of stories of these types of technologies being pretty inefficient back when they first came out. And them, either targeting the wrong target, sometimes even targeting the plane that it was fired from, or just having a really low hit chance. But the problem is that, yes, we have these huge advances in technology like radar-guided missiles, which are a lot more reliable, but we haven't looking back and actually improved upon our old heat-seeking missiles, I feel, in terms of where we're going with artificial intelligence. Because it would seem to me that with modern processing and AI, that we would be able to use classical heat-seeking or infrared tracking to be able to gain a target in the weapon's field of view and be able to discern that target from other targets. So you essentially lock that target, and then it would, as it's flying towards it, be making guesses or calculations, I should say, which is a lot better than just guessing, to fly in and destroy the target. And while it's flying the whole time, it'd be learning more about that target before hitting it. That way it didn't accidentally turn around and be like, get confused and think, oh, this is my new target. It would have to have a system built in, which is where AI comes in, to be able to discern what it shot at and other things in its surrounding. And technology like this would play really well into somebody like China's hands with hypersonic missiles, because it basically throws stealth out the window. Those jets don't get cold, unfortunately. So they can still track thermally. And so we're getting missiles that can track and shoot down stealth. That is a huge, huge problem for us. But there's another huge problem with China claiming that they've done this. And that is that as a hypersonic missile's flying, it's generating so much friction against the air that it creates so much heat that it disrupts basically all signals, including IR. I mean, when astronauts are coming back in through the atmosphere, they go into a blackout from radio communication because of the heat coming off of the actual craft as it re-enters the atmosphere. So, how are they overcoming this? Some have proposed splashing liquid or other types of cooling tubes, but so far none have been proven to be effective or practical. The Chinese research included in the paper of Chinese journal Modern Defense Technology. Instead, they used what sounds like a cooling fan, which, being a PC gamer, is hilarious. So are you saying they're attaching like a big heatsink to this thing, or they're just they're literally having fans on the outside of this missile blowing onto infrared sensor, so that way they can actually maintain? But even then, you'd imagine that just the air blowing onto the infrared device would still generate a thin membrane of cold air, but it would still have a lot of problems tracking through that, I would imagine, just because then you got turbulences and things like that. And if you do have things like that, the only way to make something reliable, in my mind, that would actually be able to hit a moving target like a jet or something like that with the IR signature would be with AI. I mean, you'd have to discern a lot more information and a lot faster. And the classic infrared technology would not be able to do that. But here's another great question. How much are these new technologies going to cost the whole world? I mean, everybody's going to be trying to develop these. So is making super smart AI, and how cheap can we start doing this? I mean, if they can just make one AI and then duplicate it, I suppose. But are we going to be putting, GPUs essentially onto hypersonic missiles? Although, to be fair, that's probably one of the cheaper parts of the missile itself. So maybe that's just an overthought. But it is really interesting. So I'm curious to see how this comes out. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think AI is going to be pushed even further with the advent of hypersonic technology? And what do you think about China's claim of making a hypersonic heat-seeking missile? And should we be worried about that? Anyways, thank you for coming and joining us on the Full Spectrum Show. I hope you enjoyed.